our own space. So it's in these moments that we awaken to the part we play in the crisis as much as we respond to the crisis itself. On stage, the figures of the sleepers awaken to the rising water levels and begin to investigate the threat that continues to fill the room. And I think this quote by Anthony Artaud is really relevant here, where he talks about us reassuming our position between dreams and events. So what is our relationship with things which seem distant and dreamlike, and things that happen right now? And how can we take responsibility for things happening around us, or things happening on the other side of the world? I think it's a really powerful quote in that regard. In the closing moments of the performance, we make contact using Skype with a performer on the other side of the world in London. So this performer's just waking up, and she's woken up by the Skype. And I'm really interested in Skype. I think it's a technology which is shrinking the world. You can now talk to somebody on the other side of the world and really get a strong one-to-one relationship with them. And so once again, in this moment, horizons collapse in the performance. Like with a falling wall, suddenly the horizon of the performance expands beyond the space, beyond New Zealand, and includes someone on the other side of the world, right at the bottom or right at the top. Brings two hemispheres together and creates a connection between bodies distant and bodies close. And so this is another awakening, the audience awakening to somebody so far away, but then so close in this physical experience of the performance. And I think it speaks of how virtuality has pervaded every enclosure of our lives, as Foucault says in this quote. So the Skype performer starts to describe what she sees in the auditorium to the performer. She says, but she describes it as a dream that she's having, or that she just had when she was asleep. And so we become the content of her dream. And I think this is really interesting because we fictionalize people through this kind of media in the projected image. And we also fictionalize people on the other side of the world. They're so far away that their problems become less important. So they're like ghosts. And so she starts to show our distance. She demonstrates to us how she's part of her dream, that we're part of her dream. And that becomes a kind of paradox in the performance. That she's dreaming us and we're dreaming her. And this is a paradox that becomes illuminated by this technology. As the Skype conversation ends, it is our melancholic discovery that we cannot help but distance those bodies which come to us through scopic, virtual realms of the media image. In this moment, there is a conflict between the subjective and the objective experience of the event. In its essence, it is ambiguous, fluctuating, and hints at the paradoxical nature of dreaming that Philippa has described before. So the performance ends with a projection of an image much like this, of a body curled into a ball and sinking into the water, away from us, down into the water. This figure shrinks into the abyss before the camera, and then it nears the horizon point between the floor and the wall of the set. This is on the back wall of the set now. The walls come back up. Almost to meet its reflection in the water on stage. It is a body in infinite reduction, but never quite joining with itself, fading until it's no longer visible, disappeared into the distance and swallowed by the depths, or lost in that interval between the mirror and its double. It's quite an ambivalent, ambiguous ending that is present even in the darkest stage tragedy, where there is the knowledge this will end soon. Resurrecting themselves, the actors will rise and we will applaud them, and everything's okay. Yep. It's a kind of resurrection. But hope, and I think that's the function of theatre, to resurrect the gaze and make us look again and think again, and recognise our own face in the image of the other. Hopefully this has also taken us to a place between science and art as well as performance, where knowledge and imagination are engaged in a shared sense of play, of discovery and of questioning. Certainly the journey for Philippa and I was not over with this work, which was presented twice and developed over 2 years. but continue to develop with new works and a new series of projects and investigations which expand the interests in this show and take them to smaller scale and different places. And so the next one of those is called On My Side.
This one really is, this work is a bit of a reflection of how working with Sam has changed my practice. I don't know if many of you are familiar with this technology, but this little watch is something that you wear on the wrist and it detects movement. And we use this all the time. Maira does a lot of work with shift workers. Most of my career has been in aviation, looking at airline pilots and how the physiology affects their safety flying and their health. And so we use these little devices, you wear them for weeks, and we track your patterns of activity. And as soon as we get the information from our research participants, the first thing we do is we take the name off, we take off any kind of personal identification, and then we stick the numbers into a database and we average them. So the individual is lost. And I've always been conscious when we do this that it's actually a story of a part of a person's life that we choose to ignore in our quantitative scientific approach. So in this work, Sam and I wore one of these watches each for 40 days. And the watch, you read the data down every minute, it records how much you've moved your wrist. And you read that data down to the computer and it analyzes when you were asleep and when you were awake. So this is Sam's life for 40 days. And the red is when the computer says he was awake. And this is when he was asleep, and he wriggled around a bit during his sleep periods. This one is my life for the same 40 days. And what is interesting is that if this was research data, this would go as numbers into a database. But Sam and I can tell you the story of those 40 days, and we ignore that in quantitative science. So my story is, here I am sleeping. I'm an older person and I'm a morning person, so I go to bed quite a bit earlier than Sam. Here, I flew to Europe. I flew to Switzerland to do some work for the World Health Organization. So that's why I suddenly jumped to 12 hours. I flew back to New Zealand here. Sam, I knew Sam was unusual. When I saw this pattern, if I hadn't known Sam, I would have diagnosed him with a sleep disorder. He has naturally very late sleep. So Sam on the weekend, here's an example here, will go to bed at 6 o'clock in the morning and sleep during the day. Sam has to get up for work during the week. So this is Sam during the week. Where are we? He has to get up early, and he can't go to bed earlier. So he goes to bed he gets up very early in the week, and then he gets up very late at the weekend. And then he gets up early again during the week, and then he gets up late at the weekend. And this is because his body clock has a different relationship to the day-night cycle, to my body clock. Part of that, we know, is to do with the genes that are part of the clock mechanism. So, but this is really interesting because I can tell the story and Sam can tell the story. So this was about trying to put the narrative back into my quantitative science. And what Sam suggested was interesting. He suggested that we should take a photograph of our bed every morning when we woke up. And I did this. I mean, you know, I'm a good collaborator. I sometimes do what I'm told. So I took photos of my bed for 40 days. And they ended up being presented as two very large banners. But what was interesting for me about this was that I felt dreadfully exposed. Those photos of my bedroom for 40 days somehow crossed a really significant boundary for me. Of course, they didn't mean to anybody else what they meant to me, but it felt like a real invasion of my privacy to show the photos of my bed to the world. And so that was also a very interesting reflection for me as a quantitative scientist about how we extract meaning and how we treat people when we do research on them. That sense of being almost violated by having my bed shown to the world for 40 days. It was a very interesting reflection for me.
In BENASC, we also presented another work. This was in BENASC was a art science conference a year ago, where we met Maira for the first time, and it was an art science conference of a lot of artists and scientists working together from around the world, mainly Europe and America. And we presented this other work as well as On My Side. And this was a performance piece that lasted all night. So the idea was that I would sleep in the window of the Science Centre with the polysomnography attached to me from about sort of 10 or 11 o'clock at night through to about 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning. And people could pass by any time and see me sleeping there. It was a work which came as a product from debates that Philippa and I had concerning whether or not it was possible to perform sleep. And I guess it was a little bit of a cheap shot in my regard, because it was an evening performance and it went overnight. So, I was also jet lagged, so I used all those conditions to get to sleep. But I wanted to also try and make sleep perform through staging it, putting it in this window, making it public, and exposing these internal machinations of the sleeping brain using polysomnography. You want to talk about something about a full night?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the thing here was, as Sam said, that this was actually sleep performing, because he was asleep. And of course, being a scientist, I liked the fact that the polysomnography was actually true to what he was meant to be doing. To me, there was concordance, because he actually was asleep. It wasn't just a performance, which is not what happened yesterday, in case you're wondering.
Yeah. The work came from a really early interest in studying homeless people asleep on the streets. This is a drawing done in Rome, and another photograph taken in Rome as well. And I was interested in how these sleeping bodies traverse thresholds. They contradict the architecture of the waking world. There's a proximity to these bodies also. Even though they're so far away and dreaming, they're also so close. People are stepping over their feet. But they remain so far away, so hard to reach. And I realized that maybe I needed to put myself in a public space where there's a lot more activity, where there are things going on, where I could investigate this relationship between a body which sleeps and a body which moves and is active. And so I